So let's go over the Thrifty bearing blocks and the concept of how they're used. If you look at the block itself, it's a fairly simple design. It's an aluminum block that has holes in it for fasteners. These are number 10 fasteners that are included with the bearing block kit, but you could also use a 3/16 rivet there. It comes with a steel rod, a steel dowel rod that has 2 half-inch bearings that slip over the end. And it comes with 2 shoulder bolts that go through the 3/4 outer diameter bearing and a shoulder bolt spacer. And these thread right into the block itself with a number 10 thread, a 1032 thread. And there are features on the back of the block that help you align to the 2x1 piece of aluminum tubing. There's also a slot that you see there on the back for a zip tie to slip through there. That's what that is for, so the zip tie can stay recessed once it is tightened up. That really helps for assembly to keep the dowel rod retained into the plate. And just as a general concept on how these bearing blocks work, the idea here is that you're going to mount 2 to the bottom of the sliding stage and 2 to the top of the first stage here. And when these move up and down, you have 8 bearings in contact with the 2x1 aluminum. You have 4 on the outside and 4 on the inside. And that's what helps this slide up and down. So let's go to the real thing now and show how you would install this on a piece of 2x1 tubing. I've placed the bearing block plate on the end of the 2x1 tubing and I'm clamping it here. The idea being you can use the plate itself to transfer drill the mounting holes, or you could use a center punch to mark them. But I just used a number 11 drill bit and transfer drilled the holes here. And it was pretty easy to do that. Once I had the hole transfer drilled, I used a pair of Cleco pliers. Clecos are temporary fasteners that you can use to hold 2 pieces of metal together. So that's me installing the Cleco fastener there. And then you'll just go about transfer drilling the other holes. There should be 4 of them for mounting to the 2x1 extrusion. Next, you'll want to deburr the holes you've drilled and make sure there's no sharp edges there. Once you've done this on all of your extrusion pieces that you intend to mount bearing blocks to, you're ready to start assembling the bearing blocks. So we've got all the parts for one bearing block here. You start by slipping the 1/2-inch bearing over the ends of the 1/4-inch dowel rod, and you insert that into the bearing block plate. You want to make sure that the bearings spin and aren't locked up by the plate itself, and then you'll take the zip tie and feed that through one of the holes and back through the opposite hole on the other side of the plate. Go ahead and tighten that up as much as you can, and then we will take a pair of cutters and snip off the excess amount of the zip tie. And you want to push the nub of the zip tie down into the counter bore. This is just to make sure that the nub doesn't rub on anything when the elevator plate is running up and down. Now we'll take our shoulder bolt and put the 3/4 bearing on it, and then put the shoulder bolt spacer. That's the order those go in. And then start threading that into the threaded holes on the outside. And you'll repeat the same step again. Shoulder bolt through the bearing, and shoulder bolt spacer after the bearing. You'll want to probably use some Loctite when you're doing this. Blue thread locker is really good to make sure these don't back out when you're running the elevator. And then you can use an Allen driver. I like to use electric screwdrivers. Gives you just enough torque to really make sure they're tight. but not too much that you're going to over torque them like an impact driver would. So it's pretty simple. That's how the bearing block goes together. Everything looks good, and you'll repeat this step for as many bearing blocks as you have. So now you'll take the number 10 bolts or the 3/16 rivets if you're using those and place them through the mounting holes and put the bottom two in first, especially if you're using bolts here because it's easier to put the lock nuts on. It's a little hard to get them started in there down in the tube, so you kind of have to reach in and try to start them by hand. I found that's kind of the easiest way to do it. And once you've got them started, you can put a 3/8 wrench on the lock nut and use an electric screwdriver to tighten up your bolts. Once you've got them secure, this is what they should look like, and you could go ahead and put the other two in. And this is just to show that the 3/16 rivets do fit in here. They clear the steel dowel rod. You could totally use 4 of these rivets if you wanted to instead for installing that. Just showing here the art of the possible that you can definitely do this. So that wraps up installing the Thrifty elevator bearing blocks. You should do this on all the locations for your elevator now.